Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for being here today, and thank you to those who are joining us via the live feed. We're very grateful to have this opportunity. Particularly want to give some thanks to Central Community College here in Columbus. They've been so generous in the way that they've helped us feel welcome and also set up great technology for us today. And then I want to give a shout out to News Channel Nebraska. Ethan is behind the scenes right now, but he also has done a tremendous job in getting everything set up today so that we can broadcast this out not just here in the moment present, but also live in the moment present from wherever you are joining us. So I probably won't look at the camera as much as I am right in this moment for the rest of the dialogue today, but I do want to extend welcome. Part of my job is to do in-person training, and to be quite honest, that's what I prefer. So when I'm reaching out via technology, webinars, Zoom, those kinds of fun things, I feel a little bit disconnected. And so sometimes I'll look at you because I want you to know I'm there with you today in this learning that we do, but also because my heart is in this. When we get to talking about strengths and purpose and engagement, I love what I get to do when I get to share about that. So I want to say thank you, and thank you to those who are here live with us today. We're going to start with talking a little bit about superpowers, and whether or not you know yet about your Gallup strengths, we're going to start with a real focus on thinking about what we do really, really well. Today is World Kindness Day, and I think that that term or that phrase or even that recognition in a day has a whole lot more to do than just buying someone behind you a coffee. When I think about kindness, and I jotted down a few things that I thought of this morning, Mr. Rogers comes to mind. And he came to mind this morning for me when I was thinking about, I should be wearing a cardigan because that was encouraged today. And a lot of people in the room are wearing their cardigans in honor of Mr. Rogers. But also because I was thinking about someone who truly was in their purpose and who loved what they did. And also he knew what his superpowers were, and he used them in such remarkable ways, in really simple ways. I also thought about Mr. Rogers in the sense of what kindness means, and to me, kindness means grace. So assuming positive intent. So kindness means assuming that every single person is showing up as their best self, giving the best that they can, but we may not know what's going on behind the scenes, whether or not we had a toddler who was vomiting during the night, or whether or not we had a late night flight getting in at about midnight and are going low on sleep. Those things we don't yet know about, maybe, about a person that we're interacting with, but can we assume positive intent? And I think that's a great way to practice kindness and grace. I also thought about Mr. Rogers and optimism, and the way that he really helped to build hope by being his authentic self, by being curious, but also in the ways that he was thinking about how to make the most of each day. Now, I'm not a singer, and if my sisters were here, they would tell you that's why I play the piano. I learned early on that I'm good at playing the piano and they're better at singing. For every job, there's someone who loves to do it. Singing is something I love to do, but I tend to keep it on the down low. Playing the piano is something that I love to do, but also do a little fairly well. And what I was thinking about is Mr. Rogers' song. And I know that those in the audience would sing right along with me if I gave them the opportunity. But the way that he said, let's make the most of this beautiful day, is true optimism. And that helps to build kindness and extend kindness. And then his genuine joy. And so as we kind of talk about strengths and our superpowers and our purpose and engagement, if we think about Mr. Rogers, that's a great example of that. And each and every one of us has the opportunity to be Mr. Rogers-esque or Mr. Rogers-like when we think about how we utilize our superpowers. These are some words that if you're familiar with Gallup and you're familiar with the Gallup Strengths Finder, that you may know what these words mean. But today I want you to keep in mind you do not have to know what these words mean, but these are great indicators as to what superpowers you might have. So what I would like for you to do is I'd like for you to turn to an elbow partner, and if you're watching this live and you don't have an elbow partner, I want you to get your phone out and text an elbow partner, but I want you to share something about you that you would claim as a superpower. It could be something that you think, I don't even know if this is really that grandiose. Claim it as a superpower. So my current superpower is that I'm really good at recreating my mom's mac and cheese. Now that has taken me a very, very long time to be able to earn that superpower status, but my kids have finally approved that I can make my mom's mac and cheese as well as my mom makes it. So that's today the superpower that I'm going to own. So I want you to turn to an elbow partner and share a superpower that is unique to you.
always keep that on hand. They're always being last minute treats for this or that, and all their friends always request that I make that, even though I tell them they, so they can even know the best. Exactly.
So I'll bring you back together. Would anyone be willing to share their superpower? Anna?
Yes, I said that my superpower is the ability to sew. So I was a theater minor, and I did all the costume work and everything like that, and actually grew up sewing. So that's something that I love to do.
And I'm very grateful for that superpower. Anna and I work together, and Anna knows that I can't sew a button on. So it's really good to know about complementary partnerships that you have in your world, especially in the workplace. So Anna has put a button on for me for one of my shirts. So I feel very lucky that I get to benefit from your superpower. Thank you, Anna. Anyone else?
I said putting my daughter to sleep. So we have a special routine at bedtime. She's a second grader, and nights when mom has to be away for work and I'm not there at bedtime, dad doesn't do it the same way as mom, and I hear about that for a long time after. But it's a really special time for me and my daughter to bond, and I just appreciate having that opportunity to help her gently go to sleep.
That's a great one to have, and hopefully a long-lasting superpower that you get to utilize because those years go really quickly. So when I think about a superpower, I think about my unique strengths or talents. Again, whether or not you know about your Gallup strengths or whether or not you've taken a super fun survey that helps you to identify, when I ask you to think about something that you're good at, it maybe ties together with something that you love doing and something that you share with others. It's a gift that you give. And one of the things that we've really loved about learning about strengths and learning about sharing your superpowers is that there's a lot of research that goes into why that matters and why that's helpful and why that is successful. So I happened to learn my Gallup strengths way back in 2009, and I'm still learning about them. But I lead with these strengths called input, communication, strategic, woo, and empathy, which I've learned mean that I'm passionately curious. I'm a gifted storyteller. I like to think about different pathways. I'm really good at connecting people, and my heart senses and feels the emotions of others in the room. Now, when I learned about my strengths, I kind of knew that about myself, but I didn't have the language to describe it in a way that was positive. I thought I talk too much, I ask too many questions, I overthink things, I think I have to be friends with everybody, and my eyes cry a lot. Growing up, I actually would hear the phrases, why so many questions? I did hear occasionally in the classroom, wow, she talks a lot. I did hear every once in a while, why are you crying? And so when I think back to that, I think about how I didn't see these as amazing superpowers or indicators of my greatest talents. But now I can name them, and I can think about ways to aim them in a more meaningful way. So when you think about your superpower, when you aim it and you own it, and you're able to share it with the rest of the world, that not only helps you, but it also helps other people. And that really points to what Don Clifton, who created an instrument called Gallup StrengthsFinder, but he also did a lot of research around positive psychology and the recognition of how knowing what you do well and focusing on that actually is an indicator to your greatest talent, but it's also an indicator for your greatest success. So what Don had studied for many years was successful people. And one of the things that he found through thousands of interviews is that most successful people shared a common trait. They knew their strengths and they focused on those in order to achieve success. So in other words, they weren't weakness fixing. And I think today, in 2019, sometimes that is a difficult thing for us to do. To focus on our superpowers, to focus on our strengths, instead of maybe focusing on what we're not getting right. And for students today, I feel that they have more reminders than ever of what is going on around them. And pressure is different today than it's ever been. So when we think about the opportunity that we have to focus on our talents and maximize those to achieve our full potential, and that will help us to be successful, that gives me kind of a deep sigh of relief. So this means I don't have to focus on the fact that I don't sing well. I can focus on the fact that I make my mom's mac and cheese very well. And when I share that gift and talent with other people, I help to build on engagement. And so we'll chat a little bit about that today. But I do want to talk about the research, and I want to talk a little bit about the data and why this is important. We've learned a lot from Gallup's research. We've learned a lot about this particular image. I have been with the Teammates organization as a mentor for 20 years, and I would say this has been one of the most significant reminders to me that what I'm doing makes a difference, that showing up makes a difference. But I will share that I've asked myself about 10,000 times over the last 20 years, what's this game of Connect 4 doing for this kid? How does it matter? Am I really doing what I should be doing? So I also learned early on in Teammates, we were paying very close attention, especially in the early years, to improvement in grades, attendance, and behavior. And those are great measurements. But we were kind of thinking about the fact that that didn't exactly measure what we did. Because as a Teammates mentor, I'm not a tutor. And thankfully I'm not, because I would have never been qualified to be a mentor had I been required to be good at 5th grade math. So I'm very fortunate that that wasn't a requirement, but that was something that we were measuring. And I was thinking as a new mentor back in 1999, what if I'm not good at this? Because I'm not good at 5th grade math. And I was hearing about the data of improvement, grades, attendance, and behavior, and trying to make a connection if mentors weren't tutors. And then in 2009, I learned about Gallup's research. And this is really significant. So this is the Gallup Student Success Model. You can take the student part out because this also applies to what Gallup studies in all of us as adults. The State of the American Workplace is a survey and an instrument that Gallup does nationally every year. 2018 results showed that 1/3 of Americans were engaged at their job. I'm going to let that number kind of settle in. Again, I'm not good at 5th grade math, but what I do know is that that means 2/3 of Americans are either disengaged or actively disengaged at work. I had a mentor recently when I shared that statistic. She asked me if there was any way to tell. She was having shoulder surgery, and she wanted to be able to ask her surgeon if he was engaged at work before he did surgery that day. I mean, it's a really interesting thing to think about. Now, I know none of you have ever been disengaged at work, but if you know someone who's been disengaged at work, you know that that can disrupt more than just the individual, right? It can disrupt the workplace, and it can affect morale, it can affect productivity. So what I loved about learning through this model is that Gallup was studying the 1/3. And what they found is that that 1/3 could name someone at work that was focused on what was right about them. They were able to share a superpower at work, and someone at work noticed that and help them name it and to claim it. So in other words, they had a boss or a manager or a coworker that was focused on what was right about them, focused on their strengths. And what Gallup found is that that was a strong indicator of engagement. Now that makes sense to me. If I'm going into the workplace knowing that at least one person is going to see something that I do well, I'm going to probably look forward to going to work. I think that's such a really simple explanation for a lot of things that we often think about. But then Gallup started to pay attention to not just the measurement of engagement, they started to pay attention to what that did for overall well-being and hope. And what they found is if you're engaged in the workplace, you're more likely to rate your quality of life or your level of well-being higher. That's a significant data point. So Gallup had been studying and measuring that in the workplace for many years, and then they started to pay attention to this in the State of the American Classroom as well. And they have a piece of data called the Gallup School Cliff that refers to level of engagement in students. And typically we have elementary students here, and then this happens in middle school, and this happens in high school. And so Gallup started to pay attention. What was an indicator for high level of engagement? And you probably already know the answer. When the student had a teacher, a coach, a parent, a mentor who was focused on what was right about them, that student was more likely to be engaged. That student was more likely to not just be engaged with that individual who was seeing what was right about them, they were more likely to be more engaged when they left that time, when they went back to the classroom, they went back to the soccer field, they went back to their family. They were more likely to carry that engagement with them. And what Gallup started measuring and paying attention to was the measurement of hope. And hope is not a wishy-washy concept. We all know stories, incredible stories of hope. But Gallup has been able to show that hope is the strongest indicator of success. Stronger than socioeconomic status, stronger than GPA, stronger than IQ. High Hope kids do amazing things, both in and out of the classroom. So they started to pay attention to how this mattered, and what they found is that high hope kids, high engagement kids, are more likely to have success in the classroom. And when I learned about this research, a light bulb went off in my head. Because as a mentor, I'm thinking about the impact of when I show up and I simply just focus on what is right about my mentee. I'm not there to fix. I'm not there to change anything, and thankfully, I'm not there to be a tutor. I'm just there to show up and see what is good and what is right, and to notice a spark or notice a superpower. And when you're talking and sharing about your superpowers, you're more likely to be more engaged. Now, if I would have asked you at the beginning to turn to your elbow partner and share something you didn't get right today, I bet you could come up with something pretty quickly, maybe 10 things if you're me. But what would the level of conversation be like? What would the tone, what would the energy be like in the room if I asked you to share something that wasn't going well or being weakness focused? So when we have that opportunity to talk about our strengths and share about them and have someone notice them, that level of engagement goes up, it affects your level of hope, but it also improves overall success. Now, as my role in Teammates has kind of expanded, my responsibility is to think about training new mentors. And I think back to my new mentor training back in 1999 and the fact that I was thinking, am I really going to be good at doing this? But also, what will these games of checkers really do for this kid? And I think whether or not you're a Teammates mentor yet, or whether or not you are just thinking about this today, for all the people that you interact with, this is such an opportunity for us to be a Mr. Rogers. For us to think about the ways that we look for the good, we pay attention to and we notice and we name what is right, and the things that are happening that focus us on strengths, because we're more likely to be more engaged and we're more likely to be more hopeful, but also that affects our overall well-being. That's a significant impact. So I was excited to get to see this research and to think about it a little bit more. I was really relieved because it reminded me as a mentor, I don't have to be good at 5th grade math. That's a big relief for me. But also that those games of checkers, those games of Connect Four make a difference. Sometimes my mentee is simply looking forward to time with me because she can beat me at Connect Four. We've been playing it since she was a 4th grader. I'm not good at it yet. I also shared recently that my mentee loves to do crafts with me. I think part of the reason she enjoys that is because she's good at it and I'm not. And she gets to be the teacher and she gets to lead our time together. And she gets to know that she's sharing things with me that I'm not yet good at, and I'm the mentor. So I think it's a powerful way for us to think about those Mr. Rogers kindness moments, but also how that overall affects a lot of people around us and affects us as well. I won't dive too much into this today, but one of the handouts I have for you, if you don't yet know about your Gallup Strengths, it's a great tool for you to utilize to learn a little bit more about your unique superpowers, but it also gives us the opportunity to have common language. Now, if you run into me at the grocery store or you run into me at in an airport or even at work, I probably don't want to talk about the weather, but I may ask you about your superpower, or I may ask you about a proud of moment. But what I try to do is really practice this opportunity that we all have to have common language about what is right with people. Oftentimes the audience that I'm presenting to is a group of 4th and 5th graders. And I challenge the 4th and 5th graders to spend the rest of the day, if just for today, to imagine there's a bubble over everyone's head that they interact with. And in that bubble is only the things that are right about that person. What would that be like? And 4th and 5th graders, they get really wide-eyed with me and they say, that could change the world. And middle schoolers say that to me as well. And then sometimes I'm talking with grown-ups and I say, imagine if there was a bubble over everyone's head and all you saw in that was what was right about people. There's a little bit of skepticism. But as 4th graders, we can really own it and we can celebrate it because we naturally look for and see the good. So I'm going to task all of you today to spend a little bit of time in your 4th grade, 3rd grade self and think about how easy it was to notice what is right and to continue to practice that. So my challenge for you today, if just for today, especially in World Kindness Day, to focus on that bubble over everyone's head that shows what is right about them and have some common language about what is right. So ask someone, what's your superpower? Wouldn't that be a great conversation to have in the grocery store line? What's your superpower? You might elicit a few raised eyebrow responses, but it's a great way to have a dialogue that really helps us to do more of this and to help others be more hopeful and more engaged. So as we think about this, what I'd like you to do is we're going to practice this. All of our time today is an opportunity for us to practice. I love growth mindset, and we're going to talk about that here in just a moment. But growth mindset is a reminder for me that I'm not good at a lot of things yet, but I have the opportunity to continue practicing. So throughout our day together, we are going to practice. So I would like you to turn to a new elbow partner. Find a new elbow partner. And if you are joining us and you don't have an elbow partner next to you, text a new friend and share something that you've done recently that you're proud of and what superpower that you have contributed to your proud of moment. I want to add a couple pieces to this. This needs to be your proud of moment. So something you've done recently that you're proud of. So not your coworker, not your best friend, not your kids, not your dog. Something that you've done recently that you're proud of. And then what superpower contributed to that. Find a new elbow partner and let's go ahead and share. So I'll start to bring you back together. This is the hardest part of my job because did you notice what happened here? This happens. So to bring people back together is one of the toughest parts because as you're sharing about this, your level of engagement goes like this. So the volume in the room goes like this. Your connection goes like this. Tell me what you thought of this activity. Did anyone have a hard time coming up with something? Sometimes this is a difficult assignment, a difficult question to ask for those of us that are adultish. Somewhere around 4th grade, we seem to see a real shift in this. So when I ask 4th graders to tell me about a proud of moment, in the time frame that I gave you, they can usually give me about 5, 6 things. They're really excited to celebrate their proud of moments. For me personally, I think it was right about 6th grade when I started to see talking about those kinds of things sounded more like bragging and not sharing a proud of moment. And that's sometimes the way that we frame that. I think one of the greatest gifts that we give throughout teammates and throughout an opportunity to be a mentor is to allow a young person to feel heard, but also to be the recipient of brags. So sometimes we might be hearing about that art project or the 2 points in the junior high basketball game, but we get to celebrate those proud of moments, and what a gift and a privilege that is. But even with your elbow partner, I'm witnessing what we see happening with 10,000 matches program-wide. There is an understanding and a recognition of strengths and talent. I could hear that in your conversations. You can listen for superpowers very easily. Now, none of you, to my knowledge, are mind readers or really gifted at being psychics, but you are able to say, I believe in you and I see how this is possible, just even with your nonverbals and the way that you were saying, I hear you, and witnessing those superpowers. Sometimes when I'm asked this question, it's a lot easier for me to come up with things I'm proud of my coworkers, or I'm proud of in my kiddos, or I'm proud of in my nephews and my niece, than for me to own and recognize my proud of moment. But I think it's important that we practice that and we be good listeners, because oftentimes we can see where those strengths and superpowers come in to help us with those proud of moments. Back to this slide, you could see that happening here. And we know in our role as a mentor, when we're showing up and we're noticing what is right and we're asking our mentee to share something that's gone well this week or share a proud of moment, they're more likely to be engaged, not just with us, but to return to the classroom more engaged, to go back to their family more engaged. And then we see higher measurements of hope. We have some great research that shows when mentors are having strength-based or positive focused conversations, that hope goes like this. When they're simply looking forward to seeing you, even if you're bad at crafts, that hope goes like this, and how that affects overall success and well-being. So my encouragement to you, as you think about how to utilize this, instead of talking about the weather, the next time you have the opportunity to have a positive conversation with someone, and in the theme of Mr. Rogers, that could be at any time, think of all those people that showed up at his door that he had meaningful conversations with. And he focused on strengths, and all of those people, if you noticed, left more engaged. They went back to their workplace more engaged. They went back to their families probably more engaged, and what that did, even watching that, to our overall level of hope. So it's possible in the way that we frame conversations and ask meaningful questions and really practice being good listeners. Because every interaction is an opportunity to inspire talent. It helps us to think about asking questions. Who are you really? What are your values? What are the things that drive you? What are your superpowers that really demonstrate what you love to do and what's important? What do you love and what do you need? We love asking these kinds of questions and thinking about really how that drives and helps us to think about our purpose. But sometimes we know that getting to our purpose will not be super easy. And sometimes there's a very creative and fun path to a successful moment. So we're going to shift gears a little bit now and talk about growth mindset. I've loved Dr. Carol Dweck's research, and if you haven't had the opportunity to check out, at minimum, her TED Talk. She has a great book as well, but her TED Talk is a great example of her research. But growth mindset has been very helpful for me because I think I'm always practicing this. I think I tend to get caught up in more of a fixed mindset. Sometimes you'll hear me say, I'm not good at crafts. I practice saying I'm not good at crafts yet. Because at this point, I'm 44, the likelihood of me getting better or learning how to sew is probably not likely, but I like to practice the growth mindset about it. And what I loved most about learning about growth mindset is that failures are not deemed as failures. It's an opportunity to grow and learn. When you think about some of your greatest life learning opportunities, we won't even use the word failure, but the times where there have been a struggle, there's often a lead to or a moment that is a trajectory to more success or a more successful period, and it happens within that learning. Challenges help me grow. Feedback is constructive. I'm inspired by the success of others, and I like to try new things. That's growth mindset. That's saying that whatever season or stage we happen to be in, we are still learning, and we have the opportunity to grow and to learn. Fixed mindset is more of a I can either do it or I can't. When I'm frustrated, I give up. I stick to what I know. It's easy for us to fall back into fixed mindset. And I'm not going to share this with you today by saying I'm an expert in growth mindset or that this comes easy to me. It does not. I have to practice it. Just like I have to practice envisioning what's above your heads and what's right about you. Because if you cut me off in traffic, it's a little harder for me to think that way. But a practice in growth mindset is an opportunity for us to truly believe in and do what this research indicates. Our brains are malleable. We're always learning. And mistakes are not failures, they're opportunities to grow. I think I like this learning most because this really applies to me. So if you can't read the screen, it says, and recently I shared this with my son. I shared this slide and he said, yes, that's for sure you, Mom. I never make the same mistake twice. I make it like 5, 6 times, just to be sure. And that's very true about me and about my life. But when I think about those opportunities to grow and opportunities to learn, it's not usually in the first mistake for me. It oftentimes needs a little bit more practice before I learn from that growth opportunity. So when we talk about growth mindset, the research points to that intelligence is developed just like a muscle. So it's not something that's necessarily you're born with growth mindset or you're born with your strength set or you're born with I can do this, but that you have the opportunity to learn new things at any season or stage of life. I am almost 45. Wow, that's really hard for me to say. I am almost 45, and I love knowing that the research points to that I can still learn new things, that I have the capacity and they have the capability, especially when I stay in growth mindset. That mistakes are not failures, but opportunities to learn, and challenges are teaching tools. What a great reminder for any of us right now today that challenges are teaching tools, helping us to think about those ways that we can practice. Be open to new learning and make yet statements. So you'll hear me throughout my presentation. There are a lot of things that I'm not good at yet. One of the things that I mentioned really early today to Ethan, who's behind the scenes with the camera, is that I'm not good at technology yet. I tend to bring a technology black cloud with me almost everywhere that I go. But what I'm learning is when I put the yet at the end of that sentence, it sounds different. It feels different. I remember when I first got a kayak, and I've been up here in my mind about kayaking for many, many years. So when I got a kayak, I thought it was going to be just like that. You just get in and out of it as I'd pictured in my mind for a long time, and it was going to be very fluid and beautiful, and then I would just paddle around the lake in a really very serene, graceful way. And for those of us who happen to know me and my style, grace and serene sort of way of doing things does not happen, but I had this picture in my mind. So when I got that kayak out and I tried to get in it for the first time, it didn't go how I expected. And it didn't go how I expected for many, many times. There were lots of people fishing at Prairie Queen, where I happened to take the kayak out, that could attest to this, that there was a lot of humor in me trying to get in and out of the kayak and also get the kayak in and out of the water. It's a lot heavier than you would think it would be. And I was very frustrated with the process. So I would say things like, I'm not good at kayaking. Why can't I get good at this? I mean, you really don't even have to be an athlete to be able to kayak. So why can't I get good at this? I did a Big Bend Parliament tour around the lake once where I couldn't go any other direction other than left. So when I thought about this more and I realized I teach this, I wasn't practicing what I preach and teach. I was not practicing growth mindset. So when I looked at the kayak, and every time I look at the kayak, I say, I'm not good at kayaking yet. One of the things I found out is I was using a child paddle. I had no idea that there was a difference in size, so I just had the first yellow paddle that I could find, and that was actually designed for kiddos. So that could have been one of the reasons that I was just making a lot of left turns. So getting the right gear is important. But also I surrounded myself with people that also aren't good at kayaking yet, and you can find them out on the lake. You'll notice who they are. And you can make that connection because there are a lot of people and a lot of seasons and a lot of stages of life that are making yet statements. So one of the things I want you to ponder and maybe even jot down is what's a current challenge that's on your mind? And in that challenge, could you put at the end of that sentence, yet? And will that shift your mindset? And will that help you to practice a little bit around growth mindset as well? And when we practice growth mindset, we're more likely to find our purpose. And when we practice growth mindset, we're more likely to align to our values. We're more likely to align with our strengths and superpowers. But the concept of purpose has been very enlightening for me. Back to Mr. Rogers. Mr. Rogers was a person who was in his purpose. He probably didn't get there immediately. And if you watch a few of the documentaries on his life, you'll learn that. He didn't just decide to set up shop and have a neighborhood and say, this is how I'm going to share with the rest of the world about kindness and about learning new things. It didn't happen overnight for Mr. Rogers. There were a lot of moments, a lot of bumps along the way. But when you think about, and you know, and I hope this is you, when someone is in their purpose, you feel it. You sense it, it radiates. It's an energy that being around someone who's in their purpose, you just know. My hope is that we can do a lot of things to help young people understand that this isn't something that happens overnight. You don't have to know right now, but how important it is that we practice growth mindset to get to that understanding. So the definition that I'll use today around purpose is that long-term, far horizon goal that's meaningful and inspired by a desire to make a difference in the broader world. Back to Mr. Rogers. When you think about someone in their purpose, even still today, and he's no longer with us, that has created those ripples and created that energy because he was able to take a superpower that he had and share that with other people. So as we talk about purpose, I think it's important for us to think back to that slide around strengths, hope, and engagement, and what affects that. What affects levels of engagement? And when we think about engagement and purpose, is there an engagement problem or is there a purpose crisis? So I think about my own two children who are 23 and 19, and even me as a mom, the amount of pressure that has been put on them to know what they're going to do with their lives. I'd like for you to practice this with me right now. I want you to think about your fourth grade self. Your fourth grade self, what did you think you'd be doing at this season of your life? So when it comes to a role or it comes to something that you might be doing at this point, what was your trajectory as a fourth grader? So I'll share with you before I have you turn to a new elbow partner, and you're going to share this out. So I'm Allison. This is how I want you to practice this. I'm Allison. And one of the roles that I have now today is I'm a mom and I'm a trainer, and I like to think I'm an awesome auntie. So those are some realistic roles that I have right now. Fourth grade self thought that by now I would be a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader and an attorney. I was going to have a dual career. Attorney by day, Cowboys cheerleader at night. So I'd like you to do the same thing. I'd like you to share your name, a role that you have, and then fourth grade self. What did fourth grade self think that you would have as a role today? Make sense to everybody? Okay. Find a new elbow partner. You might have to move a little bit, and then you'll share.
My teacher. So, sorry. But my fourth grade self thought I was going to be a constructionist. Actually, when I was I used to interview my airbrush before we go to school and said, what are you excited about today? there's 3 jobs, and a teacher is or close to 7th grade, which is $56,000. That's pretty good. I don't think that's not. Yeah. And you can have a part-time job, so just nice. And you get a better leadership position. Yeah. Just like my mom's a parateacher, so obviously. And there was something just, I enjoy being a lawyer, but it wasn't the right age. So I think, and you talked about that a lot too, about how much you loved that. So because you are impacting lives and maybe a position impact other that we have. So I still believe that I did definitely feel it's really asshole. So I graduated my class. But to be able to apply those skills in a way that because there's that pressure to
So once you wrap up your conversation, I'll have you return to your original spot. Back to your safe, comfortable pod is what we call that. So I really love this question because it elicits a lot of conversation. And I love to hear kind of some feedback on, are there ties to 4th grade self and either what you're doing today or things that you love doing today? Did you find a tie to that?
Yes.
So you may not be in that job exactly. I'm not exactly a Dallas Cowboys cheerleader, but part of my role for teammates is to be a cheerleader for teammates and to help people get excited about teammates and to articulate joy about teammates, but also to be a cheerleader who supports teammates. So there is kind of a tie to that. Did you find that correlation? I think it's really powerful when we think about what we love to do. We probably knew that really early on. When I was in 4th grade, I asked for a filing cabinet for Christmas because I was already collecting my favorite hairstyles and dream home and quotes that I loved. That's how I really interacted. I love to collect those things. That's how my brain works, like Pinterest. I wish I'd have thought of Pinterest. But I still love to do that, and that's part of my job now. I design our mentor resource library, and I take all those things I'm collecting in my head, and I plug them into Dropbox links so that other people can find them when they need them. The mentor resource library is just-in-time training that I'm able to take those things that I've been thinking about and pieces I want to share with others. So it's like a big filing cabinet for me. So if you can think about your 4th grade self and what you loved doing then, or maybe what you thought, it might not be exactly the same trajectory, but also your 4th grade self gives you a lot of grace. And your 4th grade self probably knew that you wouldn't get there immediately. I know none of you have ever had a job that you've hated, but I have. My first internship, which I loved, was at an insurance office. And my job was to be at the front desk. And a gentleman named Lauren, he had a crop and personal lines and casualty life insurance. So it was basically like a smaller community. And I got to work at the front desk, and so people would come in and they'd ask me questions, and I'd get to meet new people and talk to them about what was happening, and my heart could feel the things that they were going through. I loved that job. I got to talk to people all day long. And I was so good at that job, in fact, that I got promoted. And a promotion meant that I got an office, and I got paid more, but I entered deck sheets all day. I didn't interact with people anymore, and I didn't love that job. I would sometimes look, even though it was the same organization, I'd sometimes look at the clock and it would be 3 o'clock and I'd think, how am I going to get through the next 2 hours? Now, I know none of you have probably ever been in that position, but I want you to think about that, or if you've known someone who didn't love their job. One of the conversations I often have with my family is that for every job, there's someone who loves to do it. That's a quote from my friend Jerlene. For every job, there's someone who loves to do it. Think about a job that you love doing that maybe not everyone in your family loves doing around the holidays. Think about maybe a job that you love doing with an organization that you volunteer for, or maybe with your church, or maybe in a community organization that maybe not everyone would love to do it. I love to be the greeter at church. I love doing that. I love the interaction. Some people in my family would not love that same kind of a job, but they might love being responsible for putting together the bulletins or doing something like that. For every job, there's someone who loves to do it. When you think about that and you think about engagement, I like to think about the pressure that we put on students today to know their path. I didn't know my path to finding a job that I love, and I feel very lucky that I love my job. I get to use my superpowers every day. I get to be part of something that's making a difference, I believe, in the lives of many people. I love doing that. But I could not, as an 8th grader or a sophomore or even a college graduate, have known that trajectory. There was a lot of growth mindset that had to happen before I got to today. But I think we put a lot of pressure on students to know their path. So as a mentor, I'm often reminded how often I come in and say to my mentee, Haley, what are you thinking about plans for the future? And those plans may change a lot. For me, they changed a whole bunch of times. I loved going to college where I did, but I didn't get there until probably about 4 other options that I was thinking about and some different growth mindset things that happened along the way. So when I think about engagement and I think about purpose, I love this meme. Do you all know this movie? I recently talked to my son's fraternity about engagement, and I used this same meme, and Sean's, that group is about freshman, sophomore age, and I thought, oh, I'm using the wrong meme, they won't know Goonies. All of them knew Goonies, so I have faith in the world, renewed faith in the world. When the alarm goes off on Monday morning, or also this meme. And what does that indicate? What do these 2 memes indicate?
So you're not supposed to like work.
So we hate Mondays and we live for Fridays. Now, I feel really, really lucky that in the role that I have, there are really no weekends to me because work just feels like part of me. It doesn't feel like work. I get to use my superpowers. I get to apply them. Now, I have a few coworkers in the room. I am not going to sit here and say that every day is full of sunshine and rainbows and I love my job every single day. But for the most part, I feel like I get to use my strengths and talents. I get to apply them and I get to share them with others. Back to your superpower. When you get to share that and when you get to utilize that, that's when we really get to think of the concept of purpose. So I love this image. And there's a word that's hard for me to say, but it is a Japanese term and it means reason for being, ikigai. And it means knowing your purpose, knowing your path. So I like to think about how these circles come together. What you're good at doing, what you love to do, and what the world needs. And the intersection of those 3 circles is your reason for being, your why, your purpose, your ikigai. So when you think about your superpower, and you think about what you love to do, step back a little bit and from a broader perspective, what does your community or your world need? When I think about this, I think about a lot of people, like the person who invented Pinterest, like I should have, who really just applied this. When you think about inventions and you think about technology and you think about where we are in the world today and you think about healthcare and you think about education, there are a lot of people that are taking these circles and putting them together and thinking about their why. And as a result, amazing things have been shared with our world. A bonus circle are those things in which you can be paid for. So when we think about passion and mission and profession and vocation, and also within this are our values and our experiences and our own growth mindset along the way. But what would happen if everyone in the world could just spend a little bit of time thinking about what is their ikigai, what is their reason for being, what is their purpose, where do those 3 circles come together? And I feel kind of lucky because I think the majority of this room that's with me today, you're in this. And you know that you're in this. But there are a lot of times I have dialogue with people who are really struggling to find this. And there is not an age factor on that, by the way. This is not limited to high school students who are asking themselves, what is my reason for being? What is my why? What is my purpose? Oftentimes when I do this session with mentors, I'll have mentors say to me, how do I know? How do I know that I'm really living in my purpose? I think that's such a personal question and such a personal, deep dialogue. But it helps us to think about these 4 key components when we think about our purpose and our why. When you think about ikigai, your reason for being, you've got to have dedicated commitment. So you have to be willing to show up and say, I will try. Sometimes that requires bravery. There's about a month and a half left in the decade. It's one of my favorite things to reflect on right now. 2 things I'm trying to reflect on in the next month and a half. What do I yet want to accomplish in this decade? So I can really say that I owned the last 10 years. But also, I don't think we celebrate enough. So what in the last 10 years did I accomplish? And some of those are really simple things, like I shared with you my superpower, my mom's mac and cheese. That did not happen until recently. There were lots of growth mindset practices around that. There's a secret recipe in my mom's mac and cheese, and she would not let me onto it for quite some time. So I had to do lots of growth mindset practice around learning how to do that. When you know your superpower and you're able to share it and practice it, that's dedicated commitment. It has to have personal meaning. One of the handouts that I'll leave for you and you can take with today is around discovering your values. It's a values bracket. It's kind of like determining your final 4 of your values and then narrowing it down to what's your one that really motivates you, that is really pointed towards your personal meaningfulness, your reason for why. Why you get up in the morning, why you're willing to do the hard things, why you're willing to be dedicated. And then we do have to have some goal and agency and willingness to say, I want to strive for. And then a vision larger than yourself. So back to this slide, thinking about that broader vision, that which the world needs. Now, the world right now does not benefit from my mac and cheese yet, but those in my world do. So when you're thinking about your superpower and you're thinking about the ways that you love to do it and what the world needs, it doesn't always apply to work. Sometimes it can be in volunteer experiences that you're sharing with. Sometimes it can be some of those things that you're doing that you're sharing with your family or you're sharing in relationships. When you're dedicated to those 4 key components, you're able to really think about your purpose. Mentors also help. So if you don't yet have someone in your life that you can count on to be focused on your strengths and what is right about you, think about who those people could be. And that doesn't matter what season or stage that we're in. Hopefully every one of us can point to someone in our life who has said, I believe in you. I see what is possible for you. And they were there to help us name our strengths. Expand your vision, practice growth mindset, and start with the why. So as you're thinking about this, my hope is, if you're not in here right now today, that you're thinking about ways to create those circles. Think about the things that you love to do, think about your superpowers, and think about what your world or community needs. And bring your passion and bring your values and bring your mission. Hopefully, you can add this circle for a lot of students that are thinking about career readiness, and Anna will be talking about that next. But really just start with these 3. And what's your reason for being? So the last Elbow Partner activity that we're going to do is I'm going to ask you to share a yet statement. It could be in relationship to your purpose or your ikigai. Or it could be about a challenge that's on your mind when I asked you earlier to think about that yet statement. I want you to find a new elbow partner, and that person is going to hear your yet statement. So it could be, I'm not good at kayaking yet. I'm making that statement to all of you. You're my partners in that. Find an elbow partner and share your yet statement. New elbow partner. Or you already teamed up enough that you need a new one? You got one more? We have one more. I planned that really well. So find an elbow partner and share your yet statement.
one thing that I need to work on at home.
So what we just did is we now have an accountability partner. So you now have at least one person that can support your yet statement. Now, everyone in here kind of knows one another, but if you're in a position where you don't know the person that you shared with, I would encourage you to exchange contact information. And about 3-4 weeks from now, I'd like you to do a check-in to say, how are you doing on your yet statement? How's it going? Because we all need more accountability partners. We all need more mentors who help us to see our superpowers. What I noticed, even in your nonverbals, you were supportive. I didn't hear anyone say, oh, you're doomed, no chance. Good luck with that. There was lots of encouragement. And you know what happens when there's encouragement and there's naming of strengths and there's I believe in you statement? It goes like this. There are more Mr. Rogers moments when we help to see one another what is possible. And we practice that in a way of support and kindness. You are being kind with your eyes, kind with your words, kind with your understanding, because you're saying, I see what's possible, and you're assuming best intent. So we really love this as a way for us to think about how can we share this with others. So think about young people in your life, whether that's a mentee, whether that's your own kiddos. How do we nurture that? How do we support that? A wonderful book that I read a while back is The Element by Sir Ken Robinson. And if you check out any of Ken's work, he's actually really against testing because he talks about how it limits sometimes the capacity for a student to share their why or their purpose or their superpowers. And he tells a story about a mom whose son learned very early on that he could walk on his hands. So he was walking on his hands everywhere he went. So in and out of the house, in and out of the grocery store, up and down the steps, in and out of the school. Now you think about mom. Mom really has two options there, right? Mom could say, knock it off with the hands thing. Or mom could drive, and in her case, 45 minutes one way to gymnastics class. And that young man went on to become an Olympic gymnast. I think we all have the capacity of thinking of the conversations that we have, the interactions we have, the opportunity that we have to help someone know their why, to see they have meaning and value and purpose, and to help celebrate it by noticing their superpowers. So I want to open it up to questions, and I do want to let the group know that's watching us live that we would love to hear from you. We will show this at the end of each of our sessions today. We'll be talking a little bit more about purpose and career readiness with Anna. We'll be talking a little bit more about healthy relationships with Abby later this evening, and we'll be talking about human trafficking prevention with Stephanie a little bit later on. And we'll have some really fun commercials in between that we're excited about. And so we want you to know that we'd love to hear your feedback. So our survey, we made it catchy thanks to Tess. It's a Bitly survey so that you could find it pretty easy. It's 2019 HRS, so 2019 Healthy Relationships Summit. But it's easier to say 2019 HRS. As a great way for us to get a little bit of feedback, this is our first go talk about practicing growth mindset. We don't yet know what this is going to look like or feel like. And Anna and I really didn't know going into this what this would look like or feel like today. So we relied heavily on the superpowers of others to help us think about this day and to rely on them to share their superpowers with us. But we would love to hear from you. What do you think? How did this go? How did it go whether you're watching live on your own or you're watching live within your teammates community or you're watching live with a friend? We would love to hear your feedback. So we'll open it up to questions, and if no questions, I like to gather takeaways. So questions or takeaways as we wrap up?
Well, one takeaway is just that reminder. It's always good to think about your superpower, your why. It just helps you to refresh, re-engage, think about how do I apply this tomorrow at work. So thank you for that. It's a great takeaway.
And it's not easy. I'm a really good student, not the quickest learner, therefore I teach. So the more I teach this, the more it helps me to practice it because it's not easy. To envision what is right, sometimes is a little bit more challenging. To practice growth mindset, to make a yet statement. Sometimes it's hard for me to add that word at the end. It's just a lot simpler for me to say, hey, Ethan, I'm not good at technology, and that's it. But to open it up to a yet, it's sometimes a little bit vulnerable too, to say I'm still practicing this. Yeah, thank you, Sarah. Other takeaways? Anna?
I truly love Ikigai. I think that is an amazing way to put everything together and to give you a guideline of how to think about those things and really open up that conversation. I like that.
And I love the dialogue that we can have about it because I think, regardless of season or stage, we're all still learning. And are we in it? Are we moving towards it? Are we doing things within our job or within our family or within our volunteer experiences that honor those 3 circles? It's such a great way to frame back how we spend and expend time and energy. I love the power of discernment that we have now as a world, that we get to decide how we spend our time in a lot of ways. And if it's not honoring our purpose or our reason for being, does it really deserve time and energy in our life? That's a great power of discernment that we get to use. Thank you, Anna. Other takeaways?
Maybe took away the reiteration and believe in yourself. Believe what people tell you about you, but believe it yourself.
And it's sometimes really hard to take those compliments. So when I asked you to share a proud of moment, it would have been a lot simpler for you to share about someone else than to say this is my moment. But celebrating those. So I would encourage all of you who are listening today to think about the last decade. If you're a mentee and you're just now maybe 12, 13 years old, that's a great reflection too. But if you are a mentor, think about the last decade and how did you celebrate it? Did you pause to say, I did this well, and I can really celebrate those moments? Thanks, Susie. Well, as we kind of pause and then set up for our next commercial, I just want to thank anyone who is joining us live, thank our participants live here that are present. I think one of the greatest gifts that we give one another is the gift of time. So thanks for sharing your time with me.